Today I want to examine a question that many people consider off limits. It is a subject that provokes strong emotions, sharp disagreement, and often immediate dismissal before the evidence is even considered. I believe there are Hadith reports that deserve closer scrutiny, and I believe they raise difficult questions about Muhammad's recorded behavior when compared with the moral standards laid down in the Quran. Let me be clear from the beginning. I am not claiming that there is a single verse in the Quran that says Muhammad was homosexual. There is no such verse. My argument is different. I believe that the Hadith literature contains a number of reports which, when read together, appear difficult to reconcile with the Quran's repeated condemnation of same-sex sexual acts. Whether you ultimately agree with me or not, I believe these reports deserve to be examined honestly rather than ignored, simply because they are uncomfortable. The Quran repeatedly condemns the actions of the people of Lot. In Surah Al-A'raf 7-80-81, Lot asks, "Do you approach men with desire instead of women?" Similar condemnations appear in Surah Hud 11-70, 783, Surah Ash-Shu'ara 26-165, 166, Surah An-Naml 27-54, 55, and Surah Al-Ankabut 29-28, 29. Across these passages, the Quran consistently portrays same-sex sexual behavior as sinful and worthy of divine judgment. I believe these verses establish the Quran's moral position on the subject. If that is the case, then I think it is perfectly reasonable to ask whether Muhammad's recorded conduct, as preserved in the Hadith collections, is entirely consistent with that standard. Asking questions about historical sources should never be considered disrespectful. Every historical figure, especially one whose life is documented in detail, should be open to examination. The narration that immediately captures my attention is the account involving Zahir ibn Haram. According to Musnad Ahmad and Shama'il al-Tirmidhi, Muhammad approached Zahir from behind while he was selling goods in the marketplace. Without identifying himself, he embraced him from behind so firmly that Zahir could not see who had grabbed him. When Zahir realized it was Muhammad, the narration says he pressed his back against Muhammad's chest. Muhammad then jokingly announced, "Who will buy this slave?" before reassuring Zahir that he was precious in the sight of Allah. I believe this is one of the most unusual interactions recorded in the Hadith literature. If we encountered a similar report about another religious leader embracing another man from behind in a public marketplace, I suspect many people, including many Muslims, would naturally ask questions about it. I question whether describing it simply as harmless humor adequately explains the details preserved in the narration. Why embrace him from behind? Why does the narration specifically mention Zahir pressing himself back against Muhammad's chest? These details appear significant to me, and I believe they deserve careful consideration rather than immediate dismissal. Muslim scholars generally explain this narration as a playful act intended to encourage Zahir, who was reportedly not considered physically attractive by society. They argue that Muhammad was publicly affirming his value before God. I understand that interpretation, but I remain unconvinced that it is the only reasonable way to read the account. I believe readers should be free to examine the text for themselves and decide whether that explanation fully accounts for the details. I also consider the narrations concerning Anas ibn Malik, who served Muhammad for 10 years. These reports describe Anas spending extensive time in Muhammad's private company and witnessing many intimate aspects of his daily life. By themselves, these narrations do not establish any improper relationship. However, I believe they form part of a broader pattern that deserves to be examined alongside other reports rather than in complete isolation. Then there are the narrations found in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim describing Muhammad sharing sleeping arrangements with male companions during journeys or overnight stays. Muslim scholars explain these reports as a practical consequence of the living conditions of 7th century Arabia, where people often shared bedding because of limited space. I acknowledge that historical context. Nevertheless, I believe the repeated references to close physical proximity between Muhammad and other men naturally invite questions. Whether those questions ultimately lead anywhere is for each reader to decide. Another narration that draws my attention concerns the mukhanath, the effeminate man mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari. Initially, this individual was allowed into Muhammad's household because he was thought to pose no sexual interest toward women. Later, after he described a woman's body in explicit detail, Muhammad prohibited him from entering. Muslim scholars interpret this report as evidence that Muhammad acted to protect the privacy of his household once he realized the man was capable of describing women sexually. I understand that explanation. However, I believe the incident also provides an interesting glimpse into the social realities of the time and raises questions about how sexuality was understood in Muhammad's environment. Critics also point to reports in which Muhammad expressed admiration for the beauty of certain men, including Dihya al-Kalbi and the Prophet Joseph. Muslims generally respond that appreciating someone's physical appearance is not equivalent to sexual attraction, and I agree that admiration alone proves nothing. However, I believe these reports contribute to a larger collection of traditions that critics believe deserve to be considered together rather than one at a time. I also recognize that some critics rely on narrations claiming Muhammad admired handsome boys or expressed attraction toward young males. At this point, some viewers may ask whether I am claiming that these narrations conclusively prove Muhammad was homosexual. No, I am not making that claim. Historical evidence rarely provides mathematical certainty. Instead, I believe these reports, when considered collectively, create an apparent tension between Muhammad's recorded behavior and the Quran's moral teaching on same-sex sexual acts. That tension, in my view, deserves careful examination rather than dismissal. I fully recognize that mainstream Muslim scholars reject this conclusion. They argue that every narration I have mentioned can be explained by compassion, friendship, humor, hospitality, family affection, or ordinary cultural practices in 7th century Arabia. I respect the fact that this is the traditional Islamic interpretation. I simply do not find those explanations entirely persuasive. In my view, they often appear to begin with the assumption that Muhammad could not possibly have engaged in any behavior that might be interpreted differently, and then interpret every narration through that assumption. Ultimately, my purpose is not to mock anyone's faith or to insult Muslims. My purpose is to encourage careful examination of the historical sources. I believe religious claims should withstand honest scrutiny, and I believe no historical figure should be exempt from critical analysis simply because of his religious significance. Whether you agree with my conclusions or completely reject them, I encourage you to read the Quran for yourself. Read the Hadith collections for yourself. Compare the arguments made by critics with the responses offered by Muslim scholars. Examine the sources in their context, weigh the evidence carefully, and then reach your own informed conclusion. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please take a moment to do so now. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching, supporting, and consistently engaging with our content. Your views, likes, comments, and shares mean more than you know. To those of you who support this ministry through super thanks, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude. Your generosity does not go unnoticed. I believe God sees every gift you give and every sacrifice you make in supporting this work. By partnering with this channel, you are helping us proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ and reach people around the world with the truth of God's word. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps us continue producing content that challenges minds, strengthens faith, and points people to Christ. May the Lord richly bless you, reward your kindness, and continue to use you for His glory. Thank you for being part of this mission, and I'll see you in the next video. God bless you all.